Welcome to The Explainer. We're jumping straight into a profoundly intense, deeply human story coming out of the heart of India's capital today. If you've been following the news, you already know about the protests at Jantar Mantar. But today, we're not just skimming the broad headlines or getting bogged down in the politics. We're going to strictly examine the primary source accounts from the students themselves. We are going to look closely at the raw physical and emotional toll these young people have actually endured. So let's dive right in and look at the reality of what happens when a demand for a fair future meets a violent crackdown.
Listen to this for a second. If you break one leg, thousands of legs will stand up. That is straight from one of the protesting students. Just take a moment to absorb that. It perfectly frames the intense resilience we're about to explore. These students aren't just protesting. They are enduring profound physical trauma. And yet, as this quote shows, their spirit is just completely unbroken. Let's look at how this whole situation escalated in the first place.
Section 1. The Jantar Mantar protest, demanding justice for paper leaks.
So, the catalyst for this massive gathering? Systemic failure. Thousands of students from all corners of the country traveled to New Delhi, and their initial goal was just a completely peaceful march. They came looking for a dialogue. They showed up because massive, widespread examination paper leaks had severely compromised their futures. You have to understand, these are young people who felt the very system designed to test their merit had fundamentally failed them, and they were quite simply asking to be heard.
And what makes this crisis so incredibly massive is that we aren't talking about one isolated incident. The protesting students cited huge irregularities across a variety of national exams. We're talking the medical entrance exam NEET, the highly prestigious civil service UPSC exams, all the way to SSC and constable recruitment exams. The crucial takeaway here is that this affected millions of youths across entirely different career paths. Whether they dreamed of being doctors, civil servants, or police officers, their hard work was completely undermined by these leaks.
Section 2. The brutal physical toll, the aftermath of the crackdown.
The primary source interviews from the ground catalog some absolutely visceral, horrific injuries. We are talking about students sitting at the protest site with broken ankles and torn ligaments. Interviewers noted students with fractured hands and broken fingers wrapped up in fresh bandages. Others had swollen, completely blackened eyes from being struck in the face. And honestly, perhaps most disturbingly, there were multiple accounts and visible evidence of severe head trauma, with students bleeding directly from their scalps. This was not just standard crowd dispersal, it was a brutal physical punishing of the youth.
There is this one quote that brilliantly and tragically illustrates the profound sense of emotional betrayal that came with the physical pain. A protester, holding up his fractured hand, said, "I pressed the lotus button with this finger, and this is the very finger they broke by hitting it," the lotus being the electoral symbol of the ruling BJP. This specific anecdote really highlights a devastating reality for a lot of these youths, that profound feeling of being beaten by the very system they had actively voted for.
The reports from the ground paint a chaotic and terrifying picture, particularly for the female protesters. According to eyewitness accounts from the students, during the baton charge, female students were subjected to intense brutality. Male students recounted horrifying moments where they literally watched female peers having their clothes torn in the melee and being aggressively dragged by their hair by the authorities. In fact, a lot of the male students who sustained fractures reported getting them while desperately trying to shield those female students from the blows.
To truly grasp the extreme force that was used here, consider this detail. An eyewitness being interviewed described the authorities picking up protesters directly from the stage and throwing them, quote, like a football. It paints a picture of complete disregard for human safety. The students weren't gently ushered away, they were physically launched and discarded, which absolutely explains the massive wave of emergency room visits that immediately followed the crackdown.
Section 3. Attackers in civil dress, the unseen assailants. All of this prompts a terrifying question that the students kept repeating over and over. Who exactly were the attackers? Because when the violence broke out, the protesters realized that the people severely beating them didn't all look like standard law enforcement. The students drew a really stark contrast for us. On one hand, you have your standard police presence, right? Official uniforms, visible name tags, proper riot gear, standard issue batons. But on the other hand, the students reported being attacked by a group they called the Shoddy Vardi, which translates to those in civil dress. These assailants wore regular clothes, face masks, and had absolutely no identifying name tags. Eyewitnesses noted they had long hair, which is completely uncharacteristic of police regulations, and incredibly, some were even seen viciously beating students using regular slippers instead of batons.
And this wasn't just a random handful of people. According to the estimates from the protesting students right there on the ground, a staggering 20% of the attacking force were these unidentifiable individuals in civil dress. 1 out of every 5 people beating them could not be identified as an official police officer. It led the students to openly question if these were hired thugs or unaffiliated actors brought in specifically to brutalize the crowd without any official accountability.
Section 4. The tragic human cost beyond the physical injuries.
The number 21 carries a tremendous amount of weight here. During the protests, students actively cited that 21 NEET aspirants had already committed suicide as a direct result of the systemic failures and paper leaks. For these young people, the protest wasn't just about a delayed career path. It was literally a matter of life and death. The corruption in the examination system had already claimed over 24 lives before the police batons even started swinging.
To put a human face to those numbers, one protester tearfully recounted losing a really close friend to suicide. This friend came from a highly impoverished background in Bihar. In a desperate bid to secure his son's future as a doctor, the boy's father had literally sold his land, his sole source of livelihood, just to fund the exam preparations. When the paper leaked, that entire family's monumental sacrifice was wiped out in an instant, leading to an irreversible tragedy. The crucial point here is that these leaks were financially and emotionally devastating entire families.
And the visual representation of all this trauma was left right there on the streets of Delhi. Following the brutal stampede caused by the baton charge, a massive pile of abandoned slippers and shoes was left behind. The protesters gathered this footwear and placed a hunger strike board right in the middle of it. It serves as this haunting, makeshift memorial to the chaos and the violence. Amazingly, though, everyday citizens who saw footage of these abandoned shoes began independently ordering and delivering new footwear to the protest site to support the youths who had lost theirs while fleeing for their lives.